2018, the last time we were all using MoviePass. It was the first year I was really putting out movie content on YouTube, and so I thought it'd be fun to revisit my top 10 films of that year, to see where I still agree with that list, but mostly where I disagree, and to see what films I have seen since from the year 2018 that I probably would have added on that list if I saw them that year. So without further ado,
here it is. My top 10 movies of 2018. So this was a great year for film in my opinion.
I already disagree with myself. I also gotta say, I'm not as disappointed with the quality here, especially because I was only filming this on a Samsung phone.
So number 10 goes to a movie which I think is probably one of, I'm actually going to say, the most rewatchable movie on this list. And that movie is Searching. Now, when I say you can rewatch this movie again and again, it's not just one of those movies where it's like, oh yeah, you can rewatch it a lot.
The funny thing is, I think I've rewatched it once since I first saw it. It's actually very relevant since its standalone sequel, Missing, came out this year. And I do think Searching is better than Missing, so I would probably still put it in my top 10 from 2018.
I feel like people are either going to disagree that it's on this list or disagree and say I should put it a lot higher. But it is Avengers Infinity War. So this movie was fantastic. It did so many incredible things. The idea of love.
This is a tough one to evaluate. Being 5 years out, I don't think I would still put this on this list. From what I remember, I didn't put Black Panther in my top 10 from this year. But in hindsight, I think that was probably the Marvel movie from 2018 that should be included here.
A movie that probably not many people have seen, maybe even heard of. That is First Reformed. I actually didn't even see this movie until 2 weeks ago, and I'm really upset it took that long since it was released in May.
This is a film that I have not seen in a while, but out of all the films in 2018, I do think about this one quite often. So it would have to still be in my top 10, potentially even higher if I were to rewatch it again. It's great, and still not enough people have seen it.
Number 7. Either you didn't understand this movie, or you pretended like you did, which is what I did. Annihilation. Annihilation was everything that I wanted in a sci-fi. It deals with the subject of biology and human evolution, and almost turns it into a horror movie.
This film rules. The stock on Alex Garland definitely has gone down after watching Men, but this film is just incredible. I feel like I might have seen this 3 times in theaters, and it's one of those that I just enjoyed watching other people's reactions, seeing it for the first time. It's just one of those films that was everything that it needed to be at the time.
Superhero movie of the year. And that is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. When I first saw this trailer, I had no idea what to expect. I thought for sure this was a failure because it was such a bold idea.
Another one very relevant, having a sequel this year. If anything, I would probably put it higher on this list. And I do think that since Across the Spider-Verse is so good, it just further confirms how successful the execution of this idea was.
Number 5. This goes to my favorite documentary. A movie that, again, probably not enough people have seen. That is Minding the Gap. This is another one I have a full review on.
This one's tricky because this was one of the most impactful movies I saw that year. But overall, my personal way of viewing and rating documentaries has changed over the past few years. I don't give them a star rating on Letterboxd anymore, and I don't include them in lists like this. Just because to me, they're trying to achieve something completely different than other narrative features on this list. And so while I still love it, it would not be on this list if I made it today.
Number 4. Who knew that I would have had a romantic comedy so high on this list? And that is Crazy Rich Asians. I love this movie. Everything about it is so delightful to watch.
This movie was amazing, and I have seen it probably 2 or 3 times since 2018. And from what I remember of my last viewing, it does still hold up. Now, the placement is very high, and so today it might fall more towards like 9 or 10, but it's still great, and apparently we're getting a sequel someday for it.
This goes out to another very bold movie this year. That movie is Black Klansman. Black Klansman pulled so many emotions from me.
I will never forget the first time I watched this. I was in DC, decided to get last-minute tickets, had to sit in the very front row, and the ending of this just left everyone in silence. And I won't spoil the ending if you haven't seen it, but it pulls real footage from a very current event at the time. And so I'm curious if you were to see that today, how much that does resonate. But I do truly love this film, so it would stay towards the top of this list.
Number 2. This movie was a no-brainer to add to my list the second I saw it. Mission Impossible Fallout. This franchise is incredible. Not only because they're great movies, because they consistently get better.
I think that makes this the 3rd film on this list that had a sequel this year. If you follow me at all, you know that this is my favorite franchise most ever. So if anything, I might slip this to number 1, because having rewatched the entire series since 2018, this one still remains the best of all 7.
Okay, before we get to my number 1 pick, I need to throw out a couple honorable mentions. It might be more than a couple because, again, there were so many good movies that I wanted to add to this list.
Maybe it's just because this was the first year I was fully reviewing them on YouTube, so I was going to the theater more and just thought everything was amazing. But other than 2020, I think in the 5-6 years that I've been doing this, 2018 might be one of the worst years.
Won't You Be My Neighbor, a great documentary on the life of Mr. Rogers. It's a
Another documentary I wouldn't even consider an honorable mention.
A Quiet Place, one of the best horror movies of this year.
A film that I don't really think holds up that well.
Game Night, which was one of the funniest movies I've seen this year. The cast is so stacked.
Have not seen this since like maybe 2019, but I remember it being amazing, so I would probably slip it in the top 10.
Finally, Bumblebee. Now, I think they should have waited maybe a couple of years to get
Fourth movie in this video that has a sequel in 2023. I do really like Bumblebee, but like, come on. It was a great sit in 2018, but there's no way that's the best we could have done.
Alright, the #1 movie of 2018. If you keep up with this channel or know me at all, you probably know it's 8th grade. Bo Burnham is already one of my favorite people ever.
This is a fascinating pick that I would probably still put at #1 or #2. And it's interesting because I think at the time, having followed Bo Burnham's career up until this point, there was a lot of excitement around the fact that he was going to be directing movies like this. And he really hasn't directed any movies like this since. He had a couple acting roles, and obviously his biggest thing was Inside, which he did direct, but that is something completely different that I wouldn't even put on a list of best films of the year. And so I'd be very curious if he did direct another narrative feature, and depending how I view that one, if that would change my opinion on 8th grade or not, or if it should change my opinion on 8th grade or not. Because right now I still really love this movie. I'm just curious to see another timeline in which this leads to him doing other things like it. As far as other films from this year that I wish I would have added on this list, Hereditary is by far the biggest miss. This is a great example of me seeing more of Ari Aster's work and knowing the way that he directs a film retroactively makes me just naturally appreciate Hereditary more. Also, just seeing other classic horror movies and better understanding the context that Hereditary was working in. Two more movies that I would like to revisit would be Widows and Sorry to Bother You. I think both of those films are examples of films that I would enjoy a lot more today. I did enjoy them a lot on a surface level when I saw them in 2018, but I've grown a lot with my film knowledge, so I think there is a much better appreciation that I can have towards them, and I could see myself rating them a lot higher than what I did back then. But even like looking at the Oscars, it was kind of a weak year. Obviously, Green Book won, which was one of the worst wins in the past 10 years or so. And there were some good competitors like Roma and A Star is Born. But then you have Bohemian Rhapsody and Vice. So overall, this just feels like a weak year for films. But what do you think? Was 2018 a good or bad year for film? And where do you agree or disagree from my previous top 10 films from this year? Comment below. I want to hear what your favorites are. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. I will see you next time.